that's all for the introductions. I want to introduce Ammon Bundy. I've been following Ammon for a long time and been behind him even before he was running, which is kind of neat. But everyone, please help me give a warm welcome for Ammon Bundy.
Thank you. All right, I don't know if this is bothering you, but it's bothering me.
Square it up.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking your time out, or time to come out, and I hope that it'll be worth your while. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, if I drop the mic or go monotone, just raise your hand, let me know. So who here has heard me speak before? Okay, so probably 3/4 of you haven't. I always want to gauge. Now, those that have heard me speak, was it while I was running for office? Okay, raise your hand if it was while. Okay, so about the same, so good. Because I need to a little bit gauge of whether I'm going to go through kind of introduction of who I am, tell you a little bit about my background, and I think I'll do that if those that have heard it before will bear with me. But before we do that, I want to ask you, what brought you here today? Not like where you, Wendy already asked like where you got the information, but after you got the information, why did you come? What made you have the desire to give up your evening and come here, right here?
Well, I've seen you a few times and I just hear you speak, honestly.
Okay, so you like to hear me speak? My wife doesn't agree with you. She's done hearing me speak. No, but thank you, right here.
I wanted to look you in the eye as you shared with us your comments.
Okay.
I've heard a lot about you. I've watched a few video clips, but I wanted to watch your body language and look you in the eye to feel the truth of what you say.
So you want to find out if I'm telling the truth or not, if I'm sincere or not. You want to be able to judge. I think that's a great reason to be here. I am running for governor. I'm going to be challenging I'm pretty much the last conservative choice, at least that's the way I view it. And so I appreciate you coming here and wanting to find out if I'm who I am and sincere, right here. And then right here, right?
I just want to see the other voices besides Brenda.
Okay. So you want to see if you want another choice. You're not very happy, or maybe I put words in your mouth, but
Oh, I continue to know that you're running for governor until I watched the Conservative Daily podcast.
okay.
That's how I found out from like.
So she said she didn't even know I was running, and we run into that all the time. And there's a lot of people, the majority of the people in Idaho are kind of asleep. They're kind of not, I wouldn't say asleep, maybe that's not right. There are certainly those. But like information is very hard to get out nowadays. And so, the fact that you heard about it, I have this option, now you come here and you see if I'm worth voting for, right? Right here.
Kind of the same as her. There has to be somebody besides him. He is taking us in such a horrible direction. And this will be my 4th time streaming since last fall. And I've learned something different every time. And I appreciate, like this gal here, the first one I saw you, I knew this is the direction I'm going. Because you were sincere, and I've known through the paper how badly they have their life, and you're nothing like what they said.
I'm glad to hear that. I Googled my name the other day, like I said, and I'm like, man, this guy's a jerk. I don't really like this guy, I was afraid my wife would see it. Right here.
So, I have family who knows you. I followed you when you were in Oregon, when you were down in Nevada. I was kind of glad you quit running against Janice McGeehan, because then I didn't have to make a choice. But
I made it
do
easy
want-
for you. I made it easy for you.
But I want you to be governor. I do not like our current governor.
Okay. Well, right, one more, right here.
All I think is, the gentleman that gave the opening prayer, I met him at the library, and I told him that I had just been legally evicted from my home. And I'm 72, I have a back broken in 2 places, and some professional diabetes, and I was not able to stand in my own defense, and I was horribly violated by a state worker. Tomorrow morning, I'm filing against the state right code. I got the human rights program, I said President Bernie was telling me to happen to me. But I do want to know what's out there, because I'm one person. I can do a lot, but what's gonna happen when that's decided? We need decent leadership and we don't have.
Thank you. I thank you for fighting too. When you see something wrong, fight. I mean, it's not easy to fight in the courts. They're nonstop prosecuting me. Does that scare people? Like, I'm nonstop prosecuted by the state. The feds gave up. We beat them so many times. The feds finally gave up, but now the state's nonstop. So it's just what happens when you stand up and you say, hey, this is wrong. When you say you stand in between what is unjust and the people that it's happening to. And so I've become accustomed to that, so I know what you feel like. Now, I want to just clear a few things up. This mic seems to be having a little bit of trouble, so hopefully it doesn't continue. And I want to go through this pretty quick, but I think it's very important. I do this at most of the beginning of most of my meetings, because I think it's very important that we understand the definition of liberty. And so, what is liberty? Just think about it just a little bit, because I have to admit, before all this stuff came down upon my family in 2014 that kind of got us politically active, which we didn't ask for, but it came anyway, I had never considered the definition of liberty. Like, I mean, I knew what it felt like. I knew that I wanted to be free. I had experienced freedom. I knew it was important in my heart. I knew that, standing and singing the national anthem and patriotism, and that was really important to me. I remember I never liked it when we would go to parades and stuff, and they would drop the little flags on the ground. And so I'd send my kids all through the parade picking up those flags, because it's not supposed to be. What it represents is not supposed to be dropped on the ground. And I taught my children that. And my Emery, she's back there. She's my second youngest. She'll tell you that you don't drop an American flag on the ground. And so I felt those things, but I didn't know what liberty was. Like, I never had defined it. And I want to define it here today, because I believe that I've been able to define it, and then I found evidence that the founders believed the same thing. But it's interesting, because I found this evidence later, after I had defined it. And I'm not the only one that's defined it. I'm certainly not the originator of this. But when we really think about things, and we really contemplate, and when we're really put in a position to seek for liberty, I believe this is where we come to. So anybody want to give it a shot? What is liberty? What's liberty? What do you think liberty is? It's all right if you're not exactly right, or if you don't have it defined. I just admitted that I didn't either. So anybody want to give it a shot? Right here.
The ability to live how you want to live, where you live.
Okay, that's really great. The ability to live how you want to live, where you live. I absolutely agree with that. In fact, that's pretty close to some of the definition. Anybody else want to give it a shot? Okay, I'm going to get you, before we're done here, we're going to really be talking here. But I'm going to just, to move things along, this is what I believe liberty is. Liberty is the ability to do whatever you want, as long as you do not infringe upon another person's rights. So think about that. How does this apply? Let's apply, well, actually, let me back this up a little bit. Because we have Thomas Jefferson author of the Declaration of Independence, one of the great founders, one of the great thinkers, and he says this, liberty, so compare the two. Liberty is the power to do everything that does not interfere with the rights of others. Thus, the exercise of the natural rights of every individual has no limits save those that assure to other members of society the enjoyment of the same rights. Isn't he saying the same thing?
Ammon, that says that's Thomas Paine. This
Oh,
one-
that was Thomas Paine.
Yep,
I
that
got him
was
mixed up.
Thomas Paine, yep.
Okay, yeah.
Just-
Thank you. So now, Thomas Jefferson. Rightful liberty is unobstructed action according to our will within limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. Isn't it saying the exact same thing? Now they say it a lot better than I say it, right? I do not add within the limits of the law, because law is often but the tyrant's will, and always so when it violates the rights of the individual. So let's apply this definition. I've backed it up. This is what it is. Liberty is the ability to do whatever you want as long as you are not infringing upon another person's rights. So let's apply this. So freedom to worship. To worship whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want, as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Doesn't that seem right? That's what we believe. That's what our founders fought a revolutionary war. That's what all those people that fought and to protect, that's what they were fighting for. The right to do whatever you want as long as you do not infringe upon another person's right, including worshiping. What about your property? To do whatever you want on your property as long as you're not infringing upon your neighbor's rights or somebody else's rights. Are we losing that? We are, right? We have our cities and our counties and other institutions that are saying that you can't do that and you can't do that. And that's extremely important. Maybe if we get time, we'll talk about to publish your thoughts, be able to publish whatever you want, as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. That's almost gone in this country. It's a danger to do that. I know. Back up here. To travel, to trade with whoever you want. As long as you're not infringing upon another person's right, you're a willing seller, I'm a willing buyer, it's between two consenting adults, we should be able to do that, right? As long as we're not infringing upon somebody else, meaning as long as I didn't steal something and try to sell it to you, that's not freedom. But freedom is, I created it, I made it, it's mine, now I can trade it with whoever I want. And as long as there's a willing buyer and a willing seller, I can't force someone to buy it, that's not right. So each man or woman should be able to do whatever he or she wants as long as they do not infringe upon the rights of another person. Declaration of Independence says that this right of liberty come from God, that we were created and our Creator gave us certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So it is this ability to be free to do whatever we want as long as we're not infringing upon somebody else's rights. Is that just a good idea that government gives us? It's not. It comes from God, right? It is a right of each one of us to be able to do that. And it makes sense because I know I don't believe I was born for other people to tell me how to live and tell me how to worship and what to do with property and what to do with the things I have. I wasn't born for that, and neither were you. You weren't born for another person or an entity to tell you what to do. All right, I'm going to play this video. It's just kind of an introduction video, and then we're going to go into a little bit of my background. Idaho, to me, represents the best of what America was. Idaho was a conservative state with traditional family values, full of people of faith who carried guns, loved the Constitution, helped each other, and built businesses by the sweat of their own brow. Idaho is sliding down the path and ceasing to be the Idaho that we love. I don't want that to happen. And so I'm announcing now that I will be running as governor for the great state of Idaho. As governor, I will be implementing a plan and a platform to keep Idaho, Idaho. The Keep Idaho, Idaho plan will improve life, bring prosperity, empower and protect families, and secure the opportunity for happiness to every person living within the beautiful state of Idaho. I know how to win. My record and history demonstrates that I am willing to fight to the very end. Now it's your choice. May God bless the people of Idaho. May we live up to these blessings. May we keep Idaho a bastion of freedom and prosperity for years to come. May we be an example to the world of how to be free, of how to act, how to treat each other. And together, all of us together, may we keep Idaho, Idaho. Thank you, my friends. Thank you. How does that sound?
We need to keep Idaho, Idaho.
I think we do. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what it looks like to keep Idaho, Idaho. I want to give a little bit of background about myself, just because there's so many of you in here that haven't heard this. I grew up in southern Nevada. Why would I want to give you a background? Because again, I want to communicate to you what makes me tick, so that you can have the confidence or choose not to vote for me, either way. But I want you to understand who I am, what makes me tick. I grew up in southern Nevada, right there by Lake Mead in the Mojave Desert, very hot place to live. These are my parents, Clive and Carol Bundy. I'm grateful to have parents that loved me, who taught me right from wrong. I have a lot of brothers and sisters, and I was fortunate to be raised by good people who love the Lord, and my dad taught me when to compromise and when not to compromise, because there is a time to do both, and I'm grateful for that. Here's a picture of the Bundy Ranch. That's a dry, arid place. There is hardly any vegetation, you'll notice. But my dad runs cattle on that ranch, and we've been there for almost 150 years now. My family has been there. They moved in there in 1877. Here's a picture of my dad and the bull. You notice there's horsehair on the horns. He probably just got done hooking the horse. They're pretty rank because they have to be. They live out in the desert. They got to survive out there. In fact, you'll see this bull is part Watusi, part Hereford and Brahma. It's got the big hump on his back, because you have to have about at least a quarter Brahma in them, because that's the only bovine that sweats. And if they don't sweat, they can't survive out there. This is my little brother. This is something I grew up with, just branding calves. You'll notice the old stockade corral made of cedar posts. This is my little sister getting off the bus. She's met by steer and 4 dogs. And this is just not, we were the first to get on the bus and the first to get off. Or the last to get off, excuse me. The first to get on, last to get off. Because we live so far out of town. And so we spent about an hour going to school and an hour coming from school every day. And this is who I am. This calf, actually, my dad saved this calf, did an emergency C-section on his mother because his mother got hit on the highway. And so my dad got called, or I don't know how he knew about it, but he gets up there. The mother is clearly dying, and so he did an emergency C-section, and then we bottle fed the calf. In fact, it's a weird scene, because when this bull got to be a really nice big bull, and he would go out in the field and lay down, and all the dogs and even the sheep would all lay down in one pile together. And I think they were having an identity crisis. Now, when I was about 15 years old or so, my father came to me and said, "You know, Ammon, this ranch just isn't big enough for the both of us." And he was doing it out of love, because he was telling me in his own way that the ranch just isn't big enough. It doesn't produce enough of living to produce for more than a couple families. And I was in the middle of the bunch, and most likely I was going to have to go and leave and go find a living another way. Now, before that, I did go serve a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Minnesota. Served a 2-year mission in Minnesota. And what I learned there, it refined me, first of all, a lot more than I was refined. I mean, I grew up on the ranch. I was kind of that, rough and tough. Although my dad always taught us about the gospel, and we had a great love and respect. We always said prayers before we ate and before we went and did something important. but I didn't have that refinement. I go out on a mission, you know, suit and tie, talking to people. It was really good for me. I learned how to talk other than ranch talk, and I also decided and learned through that process that whatever I did in my life, I wanted to do for the Lord. That I wanted the Lord to be okay with what I was doing, and so that's stuck with me. That's how I feel today. I want to do what the Lord wants me to do, and not just for myself. And so then after that, I went to a little bit of college at Southern Utah University in Cedar City, Utah. And I was there. I started a little business, and I couldn't figure out like why I was there for so long, because I was there for 6 years. My business really needed to go somewhere else. It wasn't really great for a small metropolitan area because I was taking care of commercial trucks, and I needed a place where there was more commercial trucks in Cedar City, Utah. And so I wondered why, but I felt like I was supposed to stay there. And I finally figured that out about 6 years into being there, that I was looking for my wife, Lisa. And first thing I saw her, I knew I had to snatch her up, and it wasn't very long before I convinced her to marry me. We got married, and then we moved to Arizona, and we started our life down there. I took my business down there. We had all our children there. I have 6 children, 3 boys, 3 girls. My oldest is 19, and my youngest is 7 years old. So I'm right in the mix of it. Like I've got, I don't know, you do the math, I got a whole bunch of teenagers, and sometimes we really feel that. So we're right in the middle of it. That's my greatest concern when I leave and go out and about. Wendy can testify to this. My greatest concern is I'm leaving my family, and I need to be that father. I need to play that role. So this has been a challenge in traveling and doing all those things that we're doing, being away from my family. And I think we're doing okay, though. They support, and we're doing okay. Now, I did take my business down there, and there was a lot more work down there, and so I ended up building one of the largest fleet maintenance companies in Arizona. It was one of the largest private fleet maintenance companies. I've hired hundreds of people, dealt with millions of dollars a year, annual budgets. I built it from scratch up. And so it ended up being a great business that was servicing, you know, hundreds of customers and thousands of trucks in the area, and it was a great experience for me. During that time, I also could see that this industry was lacking software. There just wasn't any software like specifically for this industry. So it was really hard to do certain things easily, and we were dealing with, you know, so I took all the things I'd learned over that period of time of being in business, and I hired a programmer and a project manager, and we put a team together, and it took us 4 years, and we built a software for this industry. And now it's one of the leading fleet maintenance shop management softwares in North America. And I have since then sold both my fleet maintenance company and my fleet maintenance software. And in between all of that, I moved to Idaho. I've been in Idaho for over 7 years. I live in Emmett, Idaho, across the state. Now, without going into too much, but I think I need to touch on it a little bit. During this time of business and all of that, my life was probably about as good. My wife and I look back at it, and those, you know, that decade or so of being in the kind of the tail end of my business, we probably had the best life you could have. It was the first time in my life that I had both time and money. Usually it's you have time and you have no money, right? Or you have money and you have no time. And I was able to have both for a little while. And I felt very blessed, and I had good employees and customers and good relationships with vendors and all of that. And then my family was doing well. I was serving in the church. I felt very, very blessed, very, very blessed. And then in 2014, some of you might know what happened. Basically, after 135 years or so, a little more than that, of ranching in the southern Nevada desert, the federal government come down and said, look, we're going to make this a mitigation area for the desert tortoise, and you can no longer ranch here. And my dad's like, no, we have rights. They're deeded with the state of Nevada, but they didn't care about any of that. They just ramrodded us through their own courts and basically said that we had to leave. And my dad told them, no, this was my heritage. I inherited this. My dad would be the fourth generation. And he wasn't just going to walk away from it. And it wasn't about cattle in the desert. It was not about that. It was about rights being treated like they were privileges. It's something we all know about now, right? That's what was happening. And my dad wasn't going to yield. This was one of those times he knew that he could not compromise. And so, make a long story short, after several years, actually, over almost 2 decades of this fight, during the Obama administration, they sent an army of federal, really soldiers, agents, armed, put snipers on the hills, surrounded the ranch, put us on siege, began to patrol the roads, and there was guards and helicopters and MRAMs, and they began to destroy the ranch, destroy the water infrastructure. It's over 100 years old. Shoot the cattle from the air, destroy the corrals and our corralling infrastructure, and then anytime we wanted to demonstrate or protest against them doing this, they would assault us. And the reason why is because they had set up these little areas that were about the size of probably this gym, not quite the size of this, and they had put barriers around, and they said, this is your First Amendment area. You can only protest here. Well, we did not do that, and so they began to sick dogs on us, beat us to the ground, tase us, do many other things to us. And we were just peacefully just trying to bring attention to what was happening to our 140-year-old ranch. Well, it worked because of social media. Back then, Facebook didn't have live videos, but you could take a video and then upload it, and it would go all over. And this is before Facebook became tyrannical, before they restricted. They just allowed everybody to post what they wanted to post. Well, it got international attention, and thousands of people started coming to the ranch from all over the country. And they were just not okay with what was happening to my family. And so ultimately, enough people showed up that they gave the federal government an ultimatum to leave. And they decided to leave. It turned everything around, everything right side up, just by the people coming. And the federal agents left, and we went back to ranching, and we tried to go back to life as normal. I went back to Arizona to my business. But life was never the same after that. It was never the same. It was never, the good, peaceful life that we had before. It was always, we were thrown in this massive media frenzy. And it's just been like that ever since. And so, and everywhere we go and anything we do, it just gets international attention. Who did I have in my house just the other day? When was it? Friday? And I said, you got 15 minutes. It was a documentary company from France. And so this is just constantly showing up at our house. I watched my dad one time step out from church, leaning against the church building on his flip phone, and he's talking to a network of 28 countries with over 300 million people listening. So this is what happened. And it wasn't by choice. Our life was really good before. But it's what happened, and it was because of the way we responded. It was the first time that the feds have ever backed down. Before, they always went to the way to the point where they kill people. And this time, it was done without that. And then, so that's, then what, then I moved to Idaho. I could go on because it never stopped. And I don't know, I guess maybe in the end, if you have questions, I could answer some of them about this. But that's a little bit of who I am. That's why I'm here. I see and understand that what we saw and happened 7 years ago is now happening to everybody. Where they're trying to say that, your right to decide what you're going to put in your body, that's not a right, that's a privilege. We tell you what to do. The right to travel, we'll tell you what to do, that to be in business, the right to worship, we're going to talk about some of this. And so I saw these patterns, and we suffered for them. Some of you may or may not know that because of what happened at the Bundy Ranch and in Oregon to another rancher that we went and stood for, and again, I'm lumping a lot into one little thing, but basically the federal government made up that we conspired against them, and they arrested us and put us in prison for 2 years. And we suffered in prison for 2 years, and half that time I was in solitary confinement, and they never even were able to convict us of even a misdemeanor. We went through 2 major trials in Oregon and Nevada. They spent $100 million trying to prosecute my family. And we walked out of there with no convictions. But the problem is we still spent 2 years in federal prison. They only accused us. Never once were able to have any physical contact with my family, with my wife or children. That was difficult. So these were the things that we saw. And then, just kind of to tie it in, and then I want to talk about Idaho. I want to spend the rest of the time talking about Idaho because that's what we're here. That's what we're here for. But just to tie this together, I came home after that experience, after being thrown in prison 2 years. My father, brothers, and others, completely innocent men, completely. And solitary confinement, all of that, come home, and I didn't want anything to do with government. I didn't want anything to do with it. In fact, I refused to vote. People, want to say they want to scrutinize me. They say, well, you didn't vote for President Trump in 2016. I was like, yeah, I was in federal prison. We don't have an option to vote there. And then when I got out, I was freshly out when that election happened, and I just didn't want anything to do with them, with anything. I just wanted them to leave me alone. And then that's how I was for 2 years, and then COVID happened. And I could see that the very same patterns that I saw with my family and on a ranch, and I saw in prison, I could see our government, Idaho, doing the very same thing. And I was like, they're never going to leave us alone. We have to react. And so I became very, very active. Very, very active. I organized people's rights. Got over 65,000 people in that. Get them all moving, and we really pushed back all over the country against this COVID stuff. And then also, and a lot of the stuff I'm going to show you now here, right after this video, is what we learned, what was really happening. And I'm going to try to communicate to you so you can make a decision for yourself. But before that, let's watch this video.
In early of 2015, my family and I moved to Idaho. We did not know what the Lord had in store for us, but we had hoped that it was a life of peace and tranquility in a beautiful little town with wonderful neighbors. And then 2020 came around. The governor of Idaho, Brad Little, forcing innocent people to lock down in their homes, threatening force if they go to church. I don't want that to happen. I want Idaho to remain Idaho, free, because we need Idaho to be free. We need to have at least one state in this country that is an example of safeguarding American principles and liberty. There's only one elected position that can peacefully turn the totalitarian direction of the state around. That position is governor. If the people will get behind a governor that will not compromise, a governor who will not yield, a governor who has been through the fire and knows how to win, then through that position, the house of government can be cleansed and the purpose of the state can be restored. For this reason, I am running for governor. So today, I will repent of my refusal to vote. I ask you to give it one more chance with me. And together, let's keep Idaho, Idaho. Together, with the strength of the Lord, I believe we can keep Idaho free. Thank you very much.
We want to keep Idaho free? Yeah. Are you willing to give it one more chance with me? All right. Well, let's talk about what's happening in Idaho. Because Idaho is in a battle for its conservative soul. And if you don't know this, then you need to become aware of what's happening. And hopefully this experience here, what I'm about to say here and show you, will open your eyes. Because we are in a fatal battle for our conservative soul here in Idaho. Now, just to emphasize that, other states have been in this battle before. States like Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, New Mexico, Colorado, and all of them have lost. They lost. And if we don't think that the same thing can happen here in Idaho, we're fooling ourselves. And the problem is, as I will explain here, it's because the things that those mostly Republican, conservative leadership were doing in those states is what ours is doing now. And it'll lead us right into the very same thing that Oregon now is. You can't even go downtown Portland after hours. You'll take your own life in your hands. And Boise's coming right along with it. So Idaho is the fastest growing state in the country. It has been for some time now. And just kind of give you an idea, since 2015, approximately 248,000 people have moved into Idaho. Now that's nearly 20 times more than the population of Boise, obviously the largest city in the state. So, and by all projections, it looks like this growth rate is going to continue. I was just with a bunch of people, mayors, different things today, and they were saying that even though the interest rate has gone up, the economy has definitely softened, the growth is still the same. And people are going to be coming to Idaho. That's just the fact of it, whether we like it or not. And so imagine adding a city the size of Boise to your state every 10 years. And that's what we're looking at. Talk about a challenge, right? So that's just a challenge in itself. Now, to make matters worse, approximately 36% of the people that are moving here are liberal-minded. And they want to desperately change our state, the gem state, into, and our conservative values. They want to change that into a more liberal, progressive, woke place to live. And they're very active about that. We're going to talk about this. So, here's a good example of what this brings. Homelessness has already in Idaho has already reached the Supreme Court. Now, with the Republican Party members controlling the governor's office, the Senate, and the House for the last 26 years. And there was only a little blip there about governors, and it's almost been longer than that. But you would think that Idaho would be the most conservative state in the United States. But it's not. I mean, we've had full control for how many years? Quote unquote, supposedly conservatives. Ours have had complete control, but yet we're still not the most conservative state, and we're doing things that we shouldn't be doing that are bringing some real problems here to us. Okay? Now, in fact, just kind of emphasizing this, Governor Little, as senator, was the only Idaho state representative to support gay marriage during the Proposition 8 movement. Remember that? Okay? Also, under his leadership as governor, Idaho has increased its food stamps program by 24.2%. That's more than any other state in the United States. So you can see here Nevada's at 22.4, 21.8, Indiana, Utah 19.6. Idaho is at the top of the list. Also, Governor Little has announced that he's directing $50 million to free government housing here in Idaho. And why is this important? Why is this important for you to know? Well, let me just sum it up. Because state housing, government welfare, free food, free healthcare programs, and pushing the gay ideology have been the staple of the liberal agenda for many, many decades now. And no person is moving that agenda further here in Idaho than Governor Brad Little. So, I mean, internalize that. Like these things, and we're going to talk about in detail what these things mean. This isn't a message attacking anybody. This is about preserving our conservative identity. This is about us remaining free, really. This is about us making sure that we don't end up like Oregon, and that Boise and our cities don't end up like Portland or Seattle, where you can't go out after dark because they've lost it. They've lost it to this mentality. So now, with understanding this, it's no wonder that Idaho is in a battle for its conservative soul. Now, if this was all I had to tell you, then I would probably be okay. We could fix these things, and we could maybe even forgive Governor Little if we could get him corrected and move forward. But this is not all. Because during Brad Little's reign here in Idaho, Idaho is not only the first fastest growing state and the one with the most welfare programs increases, but we're also the first in a few more things. Because Idaho was the first state to arrest people for attending church during COVID. The first to arrest pastors for having church outside without masks in Moscow, Idaho. Idaho was also now, so watch this. Watch what these
always trust in chariots and others trust in horses, but
what did they just take out of his hand? Does anybody know? They took the Bible out of his hand so they can handcuff him. In Idaho, for having church service. And they decided to have it outside so they could still worship. If it was me, I would have had it inside. I would have done it just like normal. But at least they were trying to, a little bit comply. And they get arrested for having church outside, and they take the Bible out of the pastor's hands so they can handcuff him in Idaho. I can't understand this. I have said this more than 100 times, hundreds of times, and I cannot understand this. And let me tell you why I'm having such a struggle with it. Because in Idaho, we really respect these guys. We want to respect them. We want to honor them. We need them. We respect them, right? But I can't respect this. And then I also know that these officers here took an oath. They took an oath to the U.S. Constitution, and they also took an oath to the state constitution. Anybody here served in military or law enforcement? Quite a few of you. So you took an oath, right? You took an oath. And that means something. An oath is a promise. It's a covenant. It's a contract. So let me show you what they took an oath to just a little bit here. Anybody have heard of the First Amendment? It's a pretty important thing in our country. And the very first line, the very first sentence says this: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And we know that this is the supreme law of the land, that the states and the people comply to that, or they have a duty to that. And so the government's it's off limits. The free exercise of religion is off limits. Now, let's say, well, maybe Idaho has something different. Let's look at Idaho. Under Idaho's, this Idaho Constitution, Article 1, Section 4, it's titled Guarantee of Religious Liberties. The exercise and enjoyment of religious faith and worship shall forever be guaranteed, and no person shall be denied any civil or political right, privilege, or capacity on the account of his religious opinions. That's pretty clear. They took an oath to this. Now let's go all the way to the back, Section 19. Just if there's any question, let's go here. It's titled, this is still the Idaho Constitution, Section 19, titled Religious Freedoms Guaranteed. Now this is beautiful language. I believe it is. It says, it is ordained by the state of Idaho that perfect toleration of religious sentiment shall be secured, and no inhabitant of said state, that'd be Idaho, shall ever be molested in person or property on account of his or her mode of religious worship. So the very thing that's happening to them, he's being molested because of his religious worship. It's a complete violation of both the U.S. and state constitution. And they took an oath to both of them, and yet they're doing it. They're doing it. We have to ask why, and we have to get to the bottom of this. Idaho also, so we were the first to arrest pastors for having church outside. We were also the first to arrest a mother for taking her children to the park. Meridian, Idaho, remember that? Did you know that this little mother is still fighting this case? They still haven't given her a trial. She spent last time I talked to her, which was about 2 months ago or so, at that point, she spent $26,000 in legal fees. And the state still hasn't dropped it. Idaho, what's going on here? Idaho was also one of the first states to raid businesses for not shutting down during COVID. They actually began to prosecute those owners. And I know this because I was one of the first ones they called to say, what do we do? We're in trouble here. So we have to ask the question, why are police acting this way? And I just want to show you something here. This is the emergency order from Governor Brad Little. This is the summary. And look, he said in his order, March 25th, we'll talk about this a little bit, this directs all individuals living in the state of Idaho to self-isolate at their place of residence. And he gives, if there's some certain essential businesses and so forth, and he says here, directing all businesses to close. Then right here, prohibiting all non-essential gatherings of any numbers of individuals. So he's saying you can't go to church, you can't assemble. Ordering the cessation of all non-essential travel. Can't travel unless we tell you. Now, why are the police doing this? Watch this. Because in section 9, paragraph 9, or page 9, paragraph 9, it says that the sheriffs and chiefs of the police in the state of Idaho and the Idaho State Police ensure compliance with and enforce this order. That's why you have it. That's why you have them arresting pastors and mothers and business owners, because of this man right here. He ordered it. He ordered them to do it. And they obeyed. What were they supposed to do? They're supposed to say, I took an oath. I can't do that. I cannot do that. And now, I'm not saying that's easy. I'm not trying to say that, pitching your job, your income against, a superior to uphold your oath is easy. But that's why they were required to take the oath. So that would become priority. So if somebody else says to do this, and they say, oh no, that's a violation, that's contrary to this, they would say no. And the law was supposed to back them up. And that's what we need to do. We need to back them up when they say no. And a governor needs to back them up. And as a governor, I will back them up when they say no. And that way we'll change the entire culture. Right? Then there won't be any tyrant that could come along with this and think he has all this army out here to do his will, when it's contrary, and put the people of Idaho in a precarious situation. Now, let's back up here, because let's just say that Governor Little was a little confused about the Constitution, about our rights and so forth. But let's say that he was really concerned about the health and safety of the people of Idaho. Now, you might question that, but let's just open up enough to consider the possibility that Governor Little was just concerned about the health and safety of the people of Idaho. Now, he still made a mistake, there's no doubt about it, but let's contemplate this. Because who remembers when Governor Little put the state of Idaho in emergency status? Anybody remember? It was in March. Remember the day, right? Well, the first one he did, it was emergency status. It was on March 13th, 2020. Now, interesting enough, remember, we're asking the question, did he do it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho, or did he do it for something else? Because interesting enough, on March 13th, it was the same day that President Trump held a press conference announcing that he was releasing $50 billion of federal money to states that were in emergency status. So to qualify for the $50 billion, not million, billion, I think I said million, $50 billion. To qualify for that, your state had to be in emergency status, had to be under emergency order. And man, Governor Little put it on the same day. Now, you might be saying, again, he was really concerned about the health and safety, and there was mayhem in the streets, and we're all, dying. Well, that's not the fact, because on his own website on March 13th, 2020, he says the first confirmed case, there was only one confirmed COVID case in Idaho on March 13th, and he put the state of Idaho in emergency status. So you have to ask, well, it wasn't for COVID. Couldn't be. We almost got 2 million people in this state, and one person comes up sick, and they don't even really know what it is. Remember all of that? And they don't really have testing, and there's all of that. But hey, let's put the state in emergency status the same day that the federal government's releasing $50 billion to states. Now, if you remember, 12 days later, Governor Little then upped the ante, and he put the state of Idaho in extreme state of emergency. That's when he issued the stay-at-home order on March 25th. But he put it officially, legally, or not legally, but he put us in extreme state of emergency. Well, that just happened to be the same day that President Trump and Nancy Pelosi announced a $2 trillion federal stimulus deal for states that were in extreme state of emergency. And at that time, there was 136 unconfirmed cases. They were just floating numbers, but there was no deaths, and there was just floating numbers that everybody was kind of floating, and he put the state of Idaho in extreme state of emergency. So we can see there might be an ulterior motive here. And then when you start going to his documents, he starts talking about and securing millions of dollars in funds. He says, President Trump is releasing money, and I put this, put us in state of, he's basically saying, and then look down here, section 46601, remember that number, because that's a code that he's saying he did. I have authority to do this using this code. We're going to talk about that. Here, he thanks President Trump for $1.25 billion. He's expecting more. Right here, this is Executive Order 2020-07, which would be the 7th executive order that he did in 2020. Now, this is really interesting, because he says here that he's creating this committee. And he says, whereas I issued a proclamation on March 13th declaring the state of emergency in the state of Idaho, whereas I issued a proclamation on March 25th, 2020 declaring the state of extreme emergency, whereas Congress has passed and President Trump has signed 3 legislative packages that provide state funding in response to COVID-19, whereas I anticipate additional congressional action on federal relief packages to states safeguarding COVID-19. It's all about money, right? Then he says, now therefore, all these whereases, all this money, now therefore I, Brad Little, Governor of the state of Idaho, do hereby order the creation of the COVID-19 Financial Advisory Committee, comprised of members appointed by and serving at the pleasure of the governor. So he's going to get his buddies. He's going to get his buddies a few, and he did. That's exactly what he did. He got about 6 or 7 of his buddies, and he put them on this committee, and they serve at his pleasure, meaning he could take them off, put them on. They got to do what he says they have to do. They serve at his pleasure. And then here he says, for the coronavirus relief funds and other funds to be administered by the office of the governor. So he created this little committee, And they're going to now administer the funds of the state of Idaho. Now, who's supposed to administer the funds of the state of Idaho? The legislature. It's not supposed to be the governor. It's not supposed to be administered out of the office of the governor. It's supposed to be administered by the legislature. Does anybody know why why it's so important that the legislature does it? Because there's 105 of them. And they have to agree upon it. And there are representatives. So they represent the people, and they represent our taxes, and they represent what we want with the state. And they're supposed to make it so that it's all out in the open, so that a small group of people, 1 or 2 or 5 or 6 or 10 or so, where they can't decide where the money goes by themselves. They have to have representation to make sure that it doesn't get spent on pet projects, or they don't line somebody else's pocket, or there's not corruption, or they don't use it to abuse the people. That's why. And what did Governor Little do here? He bypassed that, and he did it. He put it in his hands. He did exactly opposite of what our representative government is designed for. Okay, so now again, maybe knowing this, we could still forgive Governor Little. I don't know. I mean, we could, we maybe not forgive, or maybe we can forgive but not forget, right? However, I want to show you something else. I'm going to show you a few more things here. Because remember that 46601 I showed you that he said he had authority to do this with? Well, look right here. This is what he did during COVID. During a period of state of extreme emergency, the governor shall have complete authority over all agencies of the state government, including all separate boards and commissions, and the right to exercise all police power vested in the state. Oh, let me read that again. During a period of state of emergency, the governor shall have complete authority over all agencies of the state government, including all separate boards and commissions, and the right to exercise within the area all policing power vested in the state. What do we call that? That's a dictatorship. That's tyranny, right? All government, all underneath him. See how he consolidated the funds? And then he consolidated the power, all under him. This is not Republican government. This is not, and when I mean Republican, I'm meaning the term constitutional republic, right? Representative government. This is not representative. This is not free government. This is not our government. We don't believe in this. We fought against this. We have fought all over the world for 2 centuries to make sure this doesn't happen. And in Idaho, it happened. It happened. And it was Brad Little that did it. Now, again, just to emphasize his motive, just recently, in March 8, 2022, Governor Little issued a press release. And he was explaining, he's explained that I'm going to get the state out of this emergency status on April 15th. That's what he says. And this is why I did everything. Listen to this. The emergency declaration served as an administrative function to recoup FEMA dollars for a variety of needs throughout Idaho. Without the emergency declaration, we would not be able to provide for historic tax relief, a step that's even more important now as gas prices and inflation soar. Without the emergency declaration, Idaho would not be the state with the strongest economy in the nation. Without the emergency declaration, the state of Idaho would not be able to provide Idahoans with historic tax relief. I thought he did it because of COVID. But no, he's saying he did it because so they could recoup FEMA dollars, which is exactly what he acted like. But so, well, let me show you something else. Now he's giving money back to the people, and he's saying that Well, let me just read what he's saying. This is Brad Little. Any of you receive this in the mail with a check? Or to have a deposit in your bank account? My fellow Idahoans, the economy of Idaho continues to blow past projections, and we are leading the country in the economic prosperity. We achieved historic tax relief for Idahoans for the second year in a row. We are returning your tax dollars with our record budget surplus. Where did the money come from? It came from the FEMA dollars. Without the emergency declaration, we would not be able to provide historic tax relief. So it's not because of the economy, the thriving economy of Idaho, that we're getting these checks back. And they're just little bits here. It's because he took billions of dollars of federal money, and he is going to buy your vote with it. He's going to buy your vote. Did you know they're getting ready to go back in session? And guess what they're going to do right before the elections? I mean, right before the election. Governor Little is calling a special legislative session. Right now, he's calling it right now. And guess what they're going to do? They're going to give more tax money back to the people. That's what they're going to discuss. Now, isn't it an insult to our intelligence here in Idaho to think that the dark months and even year and a half during these dark months of the pandemic that he created a surplus? I mean, our businesses were closed down. The economy, we all stayed home. The schools were shut down. You know, and he's saying that these were the best 2 years Idaho's ever had. That's what he's saying, actually. If you look, he said for a second year in a row. What years is he talking about? He's talking 2020 and 2021. This is a flat lie, and he's insulting the intelligence of the people of Idaho by saying these things and doing these things. In fact, look at this. The Hill, the impact of the pandemic on the U.S. and global economy was catastrophic. Economic historian Adam Tooze characterized its impact as being the swiftest and most comprehensive contraction of global economic activity ever. And yet, during that same period of time, Governor Little saying, we have such a surplus that we're going to give you some money back. Anybody have an idea how much Governor Little, or how much the federal government gave the state of Idaho that went to the office of the governor? It's $18.7 billion. $18.7 billion. Over 2 times the annual state budget. And it went to the office of the governor, and he gets to decide whatever he wants with it. Him and his buddies. Now, in that same press release, there's a couple other things I want to point out because I'm going to get to this. Remember, we see his motive. March 8, 2022, that was very long ago. He's saying, Governor Little's statement, he says, I kept Idaho open, banned vaccine passports, never issued mandates for vaccines or masks. The emergency declaration never violated or restricted any rights of Idahoans, never put Idaho on lockdown, and never allowed for mandates for masks or vaccines. Is this the Idaho? Did I live in the same Idaho as him? Like, did you live in the same Idaho as him? I mean, if he says the emergency declaration never violated or restricted any rights of Idaho, then why was this going on? Why did this happen? Why is it still happening? Why were businesses shut down and owners raided and prosecuted for staying open? Why did he order the police to enforce this order? I mean, this order says that you have to stay in your house. And then he says he never violated anybody's rights? The emergency declaration never violated or restricted any rights of Idahoans. I kept Idaho open. Again, he must believe that we are so stupid that he can say whatever he wants to say and we'll just believe it. And the real problem is we're busy. We're working. We're taking care of our families. Meanwhile, these people that are in our own state are dismantling it. Dismantling it. And so we're going to have to get active. We can't just sit around any longer and say, I can do this while they do that. We cannot do that anymore. There has always been times where we have to leave the fields and pick up a sword. That's figurative right now. Now, let's. I'm gonna go into something else, and I'll tell you. I just started explaining this piece, but it really bothers me because. Well, let me just get into it. Did you know that during this period of time, Governor Little suspended parental rights? Now, let me explain this a little bit because of what we were doing and the organization that we organized, the network that we created, we had enough manpower and resources. We were keeping a really close eye on what they were doing, and not just them, but all over the West. And even all over the country, really. But when we noticed something that became really evident, and that was that whatever Governor Inslee would do out of Washington, the other states would follow. And I mean, he issued the lockdown orders, and the other states followed. He issued this, the whole emergency, then extreme emergency. And other states would follow. And we believe we know why now, but we don't 100% know why he was able to lead the charge, but he was. And everybody was following him. And one thing that we found in Washington, and it was by mistake, I think, well, I know it was by mistake because after I exposed it, and I got almost 1 million views on this video, and right after that video, they took this down. Washington, on their government job posting and on Indeed as well, was posting jobs for Washington State Department of Children, Youth, and Families. The department was seeking for employees in certain counties to volunteer to supervise and support children and youth in emergency quarantine centers. So they were setting up these emergency quarantine centers, and I mean, I don't have time to go through all of it, but basically they were going to force quarantine the people of Washington. And if they wouldn't do it according to the way they wanted to in their homes, they were going to take the family, the father, the mother, and the children, and they needed to have places for them. They were going to separate the family. This is completely Governor Inslee in his own words. Well, anyhow, we thought, well, if this is going on in Washington and everything that was happening in Washington, the same thing was happening in Idaho, we thought, well, we better start looking to see if this same thing is happening in Idaho. And we never saw a posting. They were never dumb enough to post employment ad, right? But we did find this. Governor Little, another proclamation, March 23rd, 2020. And he says right here, the appended list of state administrative rules are hereby suspended for the duration of the declared state of emergency in order to ensure these administrative rules do not in any way prevent, hinder, or delay necessary action in coping with the emergency. So he's saying we're getting rid of all these laws and all these administrative rules so that we can do whatever we need to do when it comes to the emergency declaration. And you'll see Governor Brad Little signed it. This is the same page, it's just further down. I want you to see. Now, this is the list that he's talking about. Can you see it? Child care licensing. So they suspended the need for licensing in any facility. If the state takes your child, they can put them in a facility, then that facility doesn't have to be licensed. It doesn't have to have, the employees or volunteers don't have to be trained. They don't have to have a certain amount of adults versus children. They got rid of the staffing ratios. They got rid of the fire safety requirements in the facility. They also got rid of the public health district inspections, so there's no inspections. They also got rid of bathroom facilities, so they don't have to have bathroom facilities, or as many. They don't have that requirement anymore, or even sleeping rooms. or even beds. Now, there's only one reason. So we brainstormed and contemplated. There's only one reason why they would suspend all of these housing requirements or laws when the state takes your child. And what would be that? Anybody? I mean, what? Okay, I'll give you a little bit of a hint. I spent 2 years in federal prison, and they would put 100 men in a room about this size with bunk beds, 2 to 3 high, and they would house you 24/7. They feed you there, and you're just stuck there. And all the building codes are out the door. They have toilets along the wall, showers along the wall. That's what you're doing. All of them out the door. Why? Why do they throw all the building codes out the door when it comes to prisons? So they can house hundreds of people in a small area without restrictions. That is the same reason why they're doing this, so that they can take hundreds of children and put them in a facility without restrictions. Now, to make matters worse, read the parental rights suspensions part. The right that a parent has to visit the child. Gone. The right the parent has of being notified of their rights. The right to notify or to appeal when you don't like what they're doing to your child. Before you had a right to appeal. What's this? They suspended the rules of contact with children? This is what he did with his emergency powers. He suspended over 127 laws. And I have this list if you want. But this is who we're dealing with. I am here, I am not saying anything that I cannot back up. This is what they did here in Idaho. This is what they did. And this and other things are why I'm so extremely concerned about our state. This is who is running our state. And we have to be aware of this. We have to be aware. Now, I want to answer your questions. I want to just have a conversation here. Hope that you can open up enough and we can all trust each other enough to have a good conversation, because I don't want to lose Idaho. I came to Idaho because I believe this is the place where we can maintain liberty and freedom and pass it on to our children. I don't want to lose it. I believe that Idaho is special and that we need to be an example to the rest of the world. But it's going to take a ton of work. It's going to take a lot of fighting. But I believe we can do it, and I believe we can do it peacefully. So, I'll do the best I can to answer what questions you have, and let's have a conversation here. Go ahead.
Well, I heard that the governor was the first to ban off-normal use for hydroxychloroquine. Is that true?
That is correct. So, thank you. There are many things that I just simply can't add because we don't have time. But did you know on March 19th, 2020, so remember that, they were still calling it the novel coronavirus. They didn't even call it COVID-19 back then because they were saying they don't know anything about it. Yet on March 19, 2020, Governor Little outlawed the use of hydroxychloroquine for COVID. And he was the first governor to do it. And now we know that hydroxychloroquine is one of the most effective remedies for COVID-19. Why on March 19, 2020, would Governor Little outlaw the use of one of the most effective remedies for COVID-19 when we don't know about COVID-19? No one knows about it.
Sell a vaccine.
So I heard it was
That is correct.
Big Pharma has him in their pocket.
Well, I think more not just Big Pharma.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. Let me see. I might have that order. I'd show it to you. If I don't, I can look it up. But that is correct. March 19th, 2020 is when he did that.
Do you think that was a strain that was attached to the federal money that you received?
No.
That was something that he had to do?
No, this was. I don't think so. I think this was the same thing that Ensley did in his state just a week or so before, and then all the other governors followed. That's just one of those things, except Ensley didn't do it. Actually, Governor Little did it even worse, because Governor Little actually outlawed it. Ensley went through one step before, he didn't outlaw it, and then he did later for the use of, he went like, he did like a guideline or something like that, and then Governor Little just went and outlawed it. He was the first in the state. So this was whatever was going on, and we know that the Western, especially the Northwestern governors, are part of what they call the Western Governors Association. And so maybe that's how they were, what they were doing and communicating, but it was happening. But I don't think this wasn't the strings attached yet. That came later, and that came with, what he's talking about is the $18.7 billion that Governor Little got. It all came with strings attached to it, heavy strings, including the requirement to follow all the White House guidelines and mandates. And they called them the White House profiles, and they came down weekly to the governor. And the governor was required to force those down upon the people. Masks, vaccines, all that, pushing that. Good question, though, or good comment. Right here.
What is IACI, and how does that affect this governor's race?
So IACI is the Idaho Commission Association of Industry. And if the best way to explain IACI is the deep state. It's the one, they're the ones in Idaho who fund, basically, they choose who's going to be the governor, they fund them, and I'll just give you an example. So, and it's something they do for, and this isn't a conspiracy theory. I mean, they pretty much openly admit that that's what they do. So anybody know who Scott Bedke is? So he's the Speaker of the House, right? I don't care for him. He doesn't care for me. But he's leaving Speaker of the House, which is the second most powerful position in the state. And he's leaving that position to go run for Lieutenant Governor. Which, Lieutenant Governor, you hardly have any power at all. You get to break a tie in the Senate. And that's about the power you get. So why would he leave the Speaker of the House, that he's been there for, over a decade, to go to be Lieutenant Governor and lose power? Because he is the one set up to run for governor after Little. That's the path. That's what they do. They have it. They have this all set up. But the problem is they are not for the people. Maybe at one time they were, but they're not. They're for empowering their industries. And I love entrepreneurship. I love business. I love small businesses. I'm all for that. I did that my entire life. I am an entrepreneur. So this isn't about businesses and labor and all of that. That's not what it's about. This is about the deep state using the power of the state to control and empower themselves and to keep themselves wealthy and influenced, and the laws doing what they want them to do. That's what this is about. And you can see it hasn't been good for Idaho. It's not good for Idaho. They've forgotten what the state is for. So I want to show you something. I wasn't going to do this and do this presentation, but I want to show you something, because I don't show very many people this, but it really I think brings home the reason why, the purpose of the state. Okay? Wendy, can you help me? Hold this. So, So, some of you may know that several times I've went and stood for certain people, families and so forth, including at my father's ranch. And I didn't have any, I didn't really have any personal gain. I didn't have any personal gain. But each time I've done that, I've had individuals come to me who served in the military or in policing forces. And they've come to me and they've pulled me aside privately, and they have given me gifts that really I don't believe I deserve, that I would never ever put on or wear myself. But one guy had served in the, I believe it was the Army, and he was airborne in the Army. Yeah, I was definitely. And he took off his hat. He goes, "This hat means a lot to me, but I want you to have it, because I believe that what you're doing was the same thing I was doing." And I was like, "Are you sure?" You know, because he valued this hat, and he wanted me to have it. This was his airborne hat. And then I had and I don't have it because actually the FBI stole it from me, but I had a duty badge from an officer that served 20 years. And he came up to me and he gave me his duty badge. And he says, "Because I believe that what you're doing is the same thing that I've been doing." And it's extremely important that you're defending people's rights. That you're defending people. And I didn't want to take it, but he insisted. And I carried it around in my front pocket. And then when they arrested me, they took it and never gave it back, along with my wedding ring and other things. And then another time, I had a man, and he came up in a wheelchair, and he had lost both his legs. And he insisted that I take his uniform, and you can see how many years he had served. And he was a diver, I believe. What's that? See, she knows a lot more than I do. But this is what would have been important to him. This is what was his dress uniform. And he insisted that I have it. And he had lost his legs serving in the military. He was in a wheelchair. He had lost both of his legs. They were above his knees. He insisted that I had this. Because the same reason. These all were independent people. But they insisted for the same reason. Because he believed that what I was doing and those around me were doing what he was doing. What the intent of why he served. And it was extremely important to him. And then, another time, I had a man come up to me, and who knows what the purple star or the purple heart is? Right? It's a Medal of Honor. Well, does anybody know what the next above that is? What the next Medal of Honor above that is? It's the Bronze Star. This man had served in multiple conflicts for over 20 years, and he was awarded the Bronze Star. And I don't even know what he did, but it would have had to have been something exceptional. It would have been saving lives. And he insisted that I take this. And it's extremely humbling to me that he would give me this, that they would give me these gifts. And I would never wear them, but I took them really reluctantly, but also knew that it would be an insult if I didn't take them. Now, another man came up to me, and he was teared, and he gave me something that to me is almost unbelievable. But he said his brother died. His brother died fighting. And they draped this flag over his brother's casket when they honored him. And inside of it is the shells that they shot at his funeral. And I've never taken it. I've never taken it apart. I don't want. And I wrapped it. I don't really love how it's wrapped, but I've I was afraid that it was going to get dirty, but imagine that. And this really has, like, it's not really about me at all. It's about what we're losing. It's about defending liberty and the importance of it. And these men, these individuals understood that. They understood that if someone doesn't defend liberty, it will be lost. And they viewed me, whether you agree with it or not, they viewed me as someone who was defending liberty. And I want to emphasize the whole reason why I shared this with you, and the reason I stopped, is because that is the purpose of government. That is the purpose of a governor. There's no other reason. He's not supposed to be there so he can get a lot of federal funding and funnel it into the state. It's not his job. His entire job, and everybody in government's job, is to secure our rights. To make it so that we can do whatever we want as long as we're not infringing upon another person's rights. And we've been pretty good about that in this country. And so here, things are completely messed up. They're completely upside down. And it's extremely important that we get it straightened out. And if we do, then all of a sudden now we're prosperous again. There's peace. That's the effects of applying the principles of liberty. Our founders applied them, and we became the most wealthy, successful, peaceful, free nation ever known in the history of man. And every time those principles have been applied, the same thing happens. Ancient Israel did it. The Anglo-Saxons did it. They did it for little periods of time, such as like the Magna Carta periods. Every time they did it, it brought prosperity, peace, success, happiness. And everybody thrived. Everybody. And I believe that that's all we need to do here in Idaho. We need to apply these true principles, these eternal principles. And if we do, then we will see Idaho thrive and prosper. And the rest of the world will look at Idaho as an example. As an example of how to live and what to do. And so let's get back to any questions, and then we'll wrap it up. I want to answer your question because we're right here and then right here. Go ahead.
How do you plan on accommodating any of this stuff if the current government that we have here in the state is corrupt enough to let little do it? How are you going to get anything done?
Well,
What's your plan?
so great question. How do we get it done? And one is it's not easy. And I believe in what we have been doing is that we have to have the people have to have an awakening and get behind those who are doing, pushing, get behind a governor who will push these things and who understands these things. Now, I could get into the specifics, so I answer that question generally, but let me just give you a little bit more specific, so I'm not, because that was a very general answer. Most of the abuses that we are seeing in both our nation and in our state are coming from the executive agencies, from the department of this or this agency or this. They're mostly coming from the executive agencies. And I'll give you a little bit of example here. This is how we spend our money here in Idaho. This is not my own graph. This is the state's graph. But 39.7, almost 40% of our budget goes to the Health and Human Services, Department of Health and Welfare. Well, they're the very same agency that believe that, that went through the process of locking us down and trying to push all of those things. So the reason why I say that is because the governor is the head of the executive agencies. Now, there are, and he has the power to decide who's going to be the heads of these agencies. He has a lot of discrepancy as far as their budgets. He has there are many that are there are 26 agencies in Idaho that are statutory, meaning the legislature requires them to be in place, and the rest are not. And so a lot of agencies can be eliminated, downsized. We can get the heads of these agencies, appoint heads of these agencies who understand these things. And a governor can do a tremendous amount of good inside the office of the governor and never even legislate anything. Now, of course, then there's that other side, working with the legislature, getting, laws and statutes and so forth that are getting rid of them or replacing them with better ones. Those are the things that can be done. What about even a governor standing behind your law enforcement officers and saying, look, here, this is the oath you take, and if you keep that oath, the office of the governor has you and the attorney general's office has you. We have your back. We'll fight your battles legally, politically, and physically if we have to. All of a sudden now, the culture of everything starts to change. We start to get the government, these bureaucracies, out of the way from restricting the people. Businesses also now start to thrive. Now it's easy to get in business. It's easy to stay in business. It's easier to trade with each other. It's easier to decide what you're going to do with your property. It's easier to decide how to use the natural resources and what are available to them. That's what causes prosperity and freedom. And so those are just, in a nutshell, some of the things in the vision that we have in our Keep Idaho plan to implement some of these things. So hopefully that answered your question, at least closely. What else? Right here. Okay, I got you, and then you, and then you. How's that? Did I miss anybody? Did anybody raise their hand after him? Oh yeah. Can you hold on? So I'm going to go here, 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 and here. Right there. Thank you.
So how do you plan to, reconcile with the growing population, quote-unquote Idahoans that don't frankly care about all of Radical's, purity and dictator, dictatorial moves and all that stuff, or just quite frankly going to vote for because of the Republicans?
So help me understand the question. Like, how am I going to reconcile with what? What group?
So just all the people that are, moving here from California, Washington, Oregon, all bringing along, those crappy policies
Right.
that don't care about all the breaches of liberty and our rights, as long as they get that tax rate. How do you
Yeah. Okay.
plan to kind of sway?
Good question. I'm going to. So these people right here, right? The 36% of the people coming to Idaho that are liberal-minded. One is they're very active. They're way more active than us. By the way, when it comes to the primaries, the Democrats outvote the Republicans 3-1. So even though we outnumber them 3-1 or 2-1, they outvote us. So. And they're very active. And part of the reason why they can be so active is because they don't have to go to work every day. And I'm literally meaning this. They don't have to go to work every day. They are the ones benefiting from the free government housing, free education, free health care, food stamps, and the list goes on and on. Now, I believe, now this might seem, and remember, remember I just showed you this budget. Try to get here. I just showed you this budget. 40% of our budget in Idaho is going to welfare. That's a lot of money. That's billions of dollars, like $4 billion. This is just the state budget. Then we got counties, and we got cities. We got the federal government on top of that, right? This I've said this many, and I'm not in one bit ashamed to say this, but I believe the number one thing we have to do to, in a way, cleanse our state is we have to stop the handouts. Because what happens? What happens when you stop this? They quit coming and they leave. And who does it leave? Who does it leave left? I mean, let's not be ashamed. I know. You know, that's like, oh my goodness, Ammon, you know. But they do it by choice. I'm not forcing them. We're not forcing them to leave the state. We're not saying no one can come here. They're just not, handouts aren't available. And so they go to Washington, Oregon, California, New Mexico, Nevada, Colorado, all those other states, right? And they don't come to Idaho because the message is that don't go to Idaho. They don't give you anything. And we and the others that we either got to go to work or we got to leave Idaho. You see how it, by choice, not by force, it cleanses Idaho? It's just simple. Let's do it. And so that's how we deal with them. I mean, I know that maybe I shouldn't be talking this way, but I'm flat out believing that we have to preserve Idaho as a free state with conservative values. And these people are coming here because it's a beautiful state, and we are increasing our health welfare programs more than any other states in the United States. So it's a great place to live. They're leaving Portland and Oregon, which has become a hellhole, but they went there because they had all these handouts, and now they could come to Idaho and get the same thing or close to, and live in a beautiful place. But I want to read you something. This is a real thing, because my buddy, 2 Saturdays ago, or maybe just 1 Saturday ago, texted me something. Here it is. So he texted me a picture, I can't show you, but he texted me a picture, and it's a cell phone and a charger, and then it has a bunch of needles around it. And then he said this. So I went for a walk on the Greenbelt with my family. Anybody know what the Greenbelt downtown Boise is, right? I went on a walk with the Greenbelt with my family in downtown Boise. I was so surprised by what I saw. We found several needles on the ground and in the bushes, some new, some used. There was a guy bathing in the Boise River naked. Went into a public restroom where there was a guy passed out with a tourniquet still on his arm. I was completely blown away by what we saw. Definitely will not be bringing my kids back to downtown Boise. So, if we want to preserve Idaho, we've got to do it now. And I believe one of the things that we need to do right away is end the handouts.
Yeah.
It's just simple. Like it's not by force. It's by choice. They can stay if they want. They just have to go to work. And we don't want to, like, there's a phasing out. Don't get terrified. We need to phase these things out. We need to be responsible. We need to do it over, a couple-week period of time. No, I'm joking. All right. So just follow up, or?
So, I do appreciate the whole, stop giving themselves a little place sentiment, but I was more concerned about how we get people elected.
Okay.
We only got some here elected. That group is what I'm going as far as getting.
Are you talking about getting people to see these things and understand them and then get behind? Certainly. Getting them here to these meetings. I know, the media. The problem here too is they don't know, many don't know, they don't want to know, but yet they still vote. So like a very dangerous combination of things, right? So they don't know, they don't want to know, but they still vote. They believe that it's their civic duty to go vote. They do it once a year or twice a year maybe, and then they think that that's their duty in government but they're actually the dangerous part of government, or at least the people, because they don't know who they're voting for. And that's why we end up having our elections look like this. So I'm going to address it at the very end, a little bit of that, what we need to do. If I could preserve that to the end and then answer these other questions so we can get through this. So I know we were right here.
So
Thanks for your patience.
Thank you. I don't have a question formulated as of yet, but my concern, of course, is the deep state in different avenues. Not only are they in the governorship, the legislation, but also our school boards. They're in our schools.
Yes, they are.
They're indoctrinating our children with CRT. They're also in our administration of the hospitals. They're giving our government is giving our hospitals thousands of dollars to prescribe a certain protocol, which does not work for many citizens have died in the United States that frankly did not need to die. But my one other concern is I heard a lady say election integrity. So, like I said, I don't have a question form, but I do have something that is of interest to me, and that's the constitutional sheriffs. And that is to do with the election integrity, where there's Richard Mack. I've just been introduced to Richard Mack. He went up against the FBI and he won. And
I know him very, very well.
And I don't know how to get it formed as far as committees where people can watch and become interviewing our sheriffs and educating our police force that they do have a constitutional obligation and at least be upheld by we the people to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. How can we formulate?
Can you imagine?
Can you imagine a governor working with the legislature, helping the sheriffs understand their duty and their power? They're the highest law enforcement officer in the county. When I say highest, higher than state law enforcement, higher than federal law enforcement. And why? Because they're the only ones that the people have given the policing and arresting power to. So they are, and that is their duty. Imagine a governor working with them. Now I'm going to bring in some of your, at least what I sense as a concern, because we're seeing all of this stuff going on in our local governments. You mentioned critical race theory in our schools. We've got, Common Core in our schools.
Oath that are doctors. It's just the same thing.
We
as
see it,
sheriffs.
yeah.
We need the re-education.
Okay, let me answer you, because I think I have an answer for you, or at least a little bit of thought, at least a thought process here. So we're seeing it in our hospitals, we're seeing it in our policing agencies, we're seeing it in our states, we're seeing it all over. And we're going, why are we teaching Common Core or critical race theory in our little towns in the middle of Idaho, the most conservative place, probably in the world? Little Idaho County, Idaho, right? No one believes it. And you say, well, why are they teaching it? It's because the school district took federal money and they signed a memorandum of understanding that they would implement Common Core or critical race theory in their schools. And so by contractual law, they have to. That's why we see our policing agencies using federal law enforcement policies, which is use of force policies. That's the word I was after. Which is an escalation, not a de-escalation type training. And we're going, why are police officers acting like this? Well, they were trained to. And why were they trained? Because the county took money, or the sheriff's office took money, that they would implement their training inside their agency. We see it everywhere. Hospitals, the state, everywhere. And it is very important that we sever this flow of money from the federal government coming down into the states. It is extremely important that we do that. And then we empower the sheriffs to understand that if someone wants to come in and enforce federal, like if the FBI wants to come in and enforce a red flag law in the state of Idaho, the sheriffs are to say no. That has happened. I have personally seen that happen. I saw it at the Bundy Ranch. I've seen it happen multiple times. If a sheriff will stand up, I've seen him back hundreds of federal agents away because they have that power, and it's very important. So thanks for bringing that up.
It would just be nice if communities, just the fellowship here, if we could have a presentation, or I think it would empower us so that we can have integrity at our elections, at our hospitals, our schools. We need to empower the people.
We have to sever the flow of money though, because what happens is you elect a sheriff, he contracts with the federal government, took $2 million and funded his department, and then the people kick him out because they don't like him, and then a new one gets in that's a constitutional sheriff, he gets in, and he's bound by contract to obey whatever the previous sheriff can contract with the federal government to go to get that money. So, we have to sever that. We have to nullify those contracts. I believe the state needs to get involved because it's inappropriate for a state entity to be contracting with the federal government without the state's permission or approval. Imagine, it's completely messed up, and we need to correct it. And it is an issue. All right, right? Was it right here? Right? Are you guys both together, or are you separate questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay, right.
So what is your plan on the governorship to deal with this big tech censorship? I just see it as the biggest problem we have because I can't find out the right information without that being out there.
So it's a media issue. I believe that there needs to be more competition in media. But one thing that we have to be careful is the governor coming in and say, look, we don't like how the media censors us, and so we're going to try to create a law to stop the media from censoring us. And then what we've done is now we've just infiltrated government, trying to control the media, the right of the press, right? That's very important. We don't do that. But somehow we do need to get, correct information. People ask me all the time, well, you're critical of Governor Little and what he did during COVID. How would have you handled it? Well, how I would have handled it is I would have gathered honest and true, confirmed credibility information, and I would have distributed it to the people and allowed them to make their own choice. That's how I would have done it. I would say, look, these are the dangers, this is the information. But the media should have been doing that. But they're too politically controlled. So I don't know, what you're after, but I believe we've seen tons of other platforms, start up. Some of them are gaining, like you can go to Rumble rather than YouTube. Rumble's really starting to, right? Well, they don't censor you there. You can post videos, you can do everything you want on Rumble. I would say that what we should do is not use these platforms, and I'm guilty of that. Right now I'm running a campaign and I got a Facebook account, I've got a YouTube account, I've got all of them along with the others. I don't know. Competition, good strong competition. I think in the situation we were in, a role of government should be to give accurate, good information, and then allow the people to decide what they're going to do with it. So, hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, I was curious. I know one of the things you talked about in the brochure was reclaiming federal land in the state of Idaho. I was wondering how you go about that, and what kind of would that be available for private sale or foreign sale? And how would you prevent the renting and pillaging of the land?
So it only be available for Bill Gates to buy. So now I have had your time for quite a while. I'm over time. So I'm going to try to condense this, but this is a very important question. And I usually get it before, and so I have a little more time to explain it. But if you'll bear with me, I'm going to go through this very, very quick. I'll try to do it in 6 or 7 minutes or so. Taking back our federal lands, or taking back federally controlled land, taking back Idaho's land. This is a map of Idaho. The red is federally controlled land. The white is private or state. It's even worse when you apply that same map to the subsurface mineral rights. 72% of subsurface mineral rights are controlled by the federal government of Idaho. It's causing 4 major problems. One is Idaho can't pay its own bills. A third of our budget comes from the federal government. And why? Because we can't make money off our own land and resources. For example, cobalt. Idaho has one of the largest cobalt deposits in the United States, one of the most wealthy cobalt deposits in the world. The federal government is controlling it, leasing it to an Australian mining company. Australian mining company is making a whole bunch of money off of it. They pay the federal government, they make a bunch of money off it, and Idaho gets nothing. Then we have to go back every year to the federal government and say, hey, can we have some of that cobalt money? Because we can't pay our own bills. Then the federal government says, yeah, we'll give you $5 million here if you put Common Core in your schools, and if you use use of force policies in your policing agencies, and if you do this and you do this and you do this, we'll give it to you. And we say, okay, well, we have to have it because we got to pay our own bills. Problem. What solves that problem? We take back our lands and we make money off our own land resources. And it is a tremendous amount of money. All wealth comes from the earth. All of it. Think about it. Everything that we have, our clothes, this building, the chairs, the computers, everything came from the earth. Our food. All wealth comes from the earth. And this is like saying 61%. It's like saying you have $1 million in the bank. Right? And you can, 610,000 of it you can't use. Okay, so that's one. Number 2 is we're landlocked. What is the white? Why is the white white and the red red? Because it's agricultural land. We've been believed to think that the federal government gave us these little pieces and that's all they gave us and the rest they kept. That's not the way it was. All of Idaho was Idaho's. But it was only, the population only came in and developed these areas because it was the agricultural land. Mostly irrigated agricultural land, and then they titled it or appropriated it into private hands. The rest of it was unappropriated land. And in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, the federal government came in and said, well, look at all this unappropriated, untitled land, and they began to claim it. I'll give you a statistic. Colorado Rockies, west of the Colorado Rockies, over 51% of the land is controlled by the federal government. East of the Colorado Rockies, 2.4%. Why? Because west of the Colorado Rockies is arid, and there wasn't irrigatable land, and so it wasn't claimed. It wasn't claimed, and the federal government came in later and claimed it. So, what are we doing here now? Well, it brings us, so the number 2 problem, I didn't identify it, it is that we are we're destroying our number 1 industry in Idaho, which is what? It's agriculture. Agriculture is our number 1 industry. And we're building, because we're landlocked, we're building on our agricultural land and we're destroying our agricultural land. And so slowly, actually fairly quickly, we're building on it. So that's number 2. Kind of brings us into number 3, which is affordable housing. We have an affordable housing crisis. Right now, the way it stands, my daughter, 19 years old, she's been married almost a year. It's her birthday today. Don't let me forget to call We've been running since early this morning. So now she's 20. She's pregnant. She's married. She did it right. She got married. She's pregnant. And, they don't need a home. They're renting, but soon they're going to want a home. And they're facing the reality now of never being able to own their own home when it comes to the income versus the cost of housing. Well, we're landlocked. Our land prices are extremely high, and also all this timber and minerals and building supplies are being restricted from us. I have a friend in Bonners County, clear up there by Canada, and he went down to the hardware store to get some lumber to build something. It was just not a lot, and he paid this huge price, and he finds out that the lumber is imported from Canada. And then the forests are burning up around them. They can't even harvest it. So they just watch it burn up. They can't harvest it. The lumber's being imported, and it's an exorbitant amount of dollars price. And it's all because the federal government is controlling our resources. And so we have a problem. And then number 4 is that these little towns all over, the youth are having to go to the cities because they're not able to make a living in their little towns, and so they're becoming stagnant. And unless someone retires or dies, there's not an opportunity really for somebody else to come in and take the place, because all around them they depend on the natural resources. That's how they thrive. Well, it's being locked away from them. So they're moving to the cities. And it only takes, a couple decades, and they lose their conservative identity, and they start thinking liberal, and they start, what I call the Hunger Games syndrome, where they start, participating in these weird things, and the men start wearing makeup, and they put on girls' clothing, and they start thinking weird, right? And then all the rest of the people are just funneling their resources into the city, feeding them. And then what happens is they build up rather than build out, and then they control the entire state politically. And they turn the state upside down. All because of federally controlled land in Idaho. We need to take back our lands in order for us to pay our own bills, in order for us to, have housing for the next generation. So the question was, how do we do this, right? How do we do this? Because this is a scary thing for me. People think like, well, you're going to turn all this red land into private property of Bill Gates, and China's going to come in and buy it all. And, that I could see how that would be scary. However, we're talking about just shy of 33 million acres the federal government is controlling. So what I'm proposing, and I have it detailed, if you go into the news and you go down, there's an article in there that says, take back, Idaho needs to take back federal land or something like that. And I go through this whole thing. But what I'm proposing in our Keep Up Idaho plan is around the towns and the cities and so forth, we need to open that up to dispose of it into private hands. But we have some really good, so we're talking about let's just say 2 million acres. Probably not that much, but let's just say 2 million acres. Just to all the hunters and fishers and hikers and campers and all that, don't freak out. We're talking about 2 million acres around the towns and the cities. Do your math, that leaves over 30,000 or 30 million acres. 30 million acres, right? That leaves 30 million acres. We will dispose of that into private hands. But how do we do that? We do that through the disposal mechanisms that we already know work, such as Homesteading Act, Desert Entry Act. Those acts were all made so that the corporation can't buy the land, or they can't buy multiple parcels. It was all to get it in the people's hands, individuals' hands. So we have good history on how to do this. And we'll use those, and it's going to take the legislature. I can't do this, on my own. It wouldn't be appropriate for me as a governor to do this on my own. So then, the rest of it, we get it, and it's already broken down into counties, and we make it what we call multiple use land, where hunting, hiking, fishing, camping, all of that is protected, right along with logging, mining, grazing, other mineral explorations. This is the way it was developed. Anybody who's an old timer knows this. Who likes to hunt here? Okay, good man of you. Well, what roads do you use in Idaho to hunt? Who made the roads? The loggers made the roads, right? The loggers made the roads. So the loggers made the roads, and the hunters benefit from it. And we've been able to cohabitat, if you want. I don't really like that word, but we've been able to what's called use the multiple use doctrines in all the western states, clear until the federal government came and said, well, it's ours. And they have their own motives, and so they stopped this. So yeah, and that'll be administered by the county, the local government, so the local people will be able to decide. There will be legislation to make sure they can't sell it, but it'll be available for multiple use. Hunting, hiking, fishing, camping, logging, grazing, mining, all in the same area. That's how it was developed before, that's how it was beneficial before, and we'll go back to that because we know it works. Meanwhile, we're protecting that and also opening up land for development around the cities and towns where most of the people want to live anyway. And that's the plan. So some might say, well, how do you do this, Ammon? Like, actually do it. Well, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a legal battle. But it's not going to be the United States government with its most powerful legal team ever known to the history of man against Clive and Bundy in the middle of the desert with limited resources. I mean, barely making a living, right? It's going to be the state of Idaho versus the federal government. And I'm very confident because this is completely unconstitutional. Completely. And I believe with our Supreme Court right now that they would rule that this is unconstitutional. I truly believe that. So we would take this land, we would appropriate it into private hands, we appropriate it into the county's jurisdiction, and then the federal government would come out, want to fight us in court, and we would respond, take it all the way to the Supreme Court, and I believe right now, we would prevail. And Raul Labrador is a friend of mine, by the way. He's been in my home, and we've had these conversations right here in my home. And so, if he gets in as Attorney General, we will have an Attorney General office that understands this, and we can fight this battle. This is extremely important. Oh man, I'm way over 7 minutes. Actually, yeah, I'm way over 7 minutes. But this is extremely important for the independence of Idaho. And it's not like we're leaving the Union. I mean, Nebraska, which was established 3 years after Nevada. Nevada has 89% federally controlled land. Nebraska has 1.4. And Nebraska was established 3 years after Nevada. Nebraska was established constitutionally. Nevada wasn't, because the people didn't occupy or go in and claim the land. So, something we need to get straightened out. I would love to keep answering questions, but I think we need to get wrapped up here. I thank you for your patience. I just wanted to say that I need your help. I need your help. Kind of getting to where I need your help. And so I need you to do 3 things for me. And I kind of blend one, so it almost ends up being 4, but I say 3, right? I need you to subscribe to VoteBundy.com. You think, well, why is that important? VoteBundy.com. Because then I can communicate with you. I'll send you information. I'll keep you informed. And then I need you to take that information and send it to all your contacts in Idaho. I know it's scary, but I just showed you here what our options are, where we're going if we don't get this straightened out. I need you to push the button and send it to your contacts. Be brave enough to do that. And even keep doing that, even if they complain about it or ridicule you. And then what you're going to do is you're going to get a lot of people saying, well, why are you supporting that guy? And then you can say why. That's That's part of the second thing I need you to do. Along with, you want to have a good conversation with your neighbors? Put a Bundy for Governor yard sign in your front yard. I'm asking you to do that. Put it in there. Put it on in your front yard and have those conversations. Now is the time. We got a little over 60 days. All right? You're starting to see, hopefully you'll see signs all over, Bundy for Governor signs all over. And then the last thing, I need you to donate. I need you to go to votebundy.com. I need you to donate. Because we're not going to win this by money, but it still talks. It still talks. Money talks. I have to pay by ads, pay $5 a gallon of gas for that RV. I have to, be able to do the things we need to do. We have good material. It's an excellent material. When you go to votebundy.com, it's organized. We're getting it. We're probably within a day or two. We'll be able to. Well, I'd say a week. Be able to almost every page on the website. You can link it and send the link. So you just copy or click it, and it copies the link, and you can send it. So the tools are there, but we have to have you go and do your part, which is those three things. Subscribe, get information, battle for me, send it out, yard signs, and then contribute. Just to real quickly wrap up here, I want to just show you really quickly what the Keep Idaho plan is all about, and then I'll close. 8 planks to the Keep Idaho plan. 1, protect private property. 2, eliminate progressive taxes. 3, free Idaho from federal control. 4, make Idaho independent again. 5, bring back the rule of law. Boy, there's a lot there. 6, make Idaho an economic powerhouse. There's no reason why we shouldn't be. We're resource rich. Why are we called the gem state? Because we have natural resources. Why is Boise area called the Treasure Valley? It's not because we're poor. It's not because we can't pay our own bills. We can. And we should be able to apply. Did you know that Idaho has a seaport? Lewiston, Idaho. Lewiston. It has the capability to be a seaport. There's no reason why we can't be an economic powerhouse. We should be. 7, secure the quality of life for every Idaho family. I talked about that. That's what this was all about, right? That's what this is all about. And then 8, make Idaho an example of peace and prosperity to the rest of the world. And we need it. We need it. We apply these principles. I believe eternal principles that come from God, that He taught our founders and others if they'll listen and apply it. And the same effect will happen. Idaho is a beautiful place to live. It's a beautiful land. It's full of beautiful people. And Idaho is a beautiful idea, and I think it's worth fighting for. So thank you for your time.
Okay, so you all should know, if you go to votebundy.com, you can watch Ammon's town hall that he did online. And you can send that to your friends. He goes over all of this online. You can send that video to him. Everyone turn back to the back of the room. And Jenny, can you raise your hand? So Jenny's a volunteer from Idaho Falls. And she's going to do short little video clips of why you support Ammon. So those of you that would like to share, go on back there and see Jenny, okay? All right, thanks very much, everyone. Thank you, Ammon, for coming up to